access session in the lead up to the July council meeting. The people who have asked to address council in the public access session have all asked to address the operational plan and revenue policy item that's coming up at tomorrow's council meeting. Speakers will be given 10 minutes to address council, after which I may ask a couple of questions. The session is going to be recorded, so I need to know from each speaker that they consent to their presentation being recorded as part of the meeting. The Code of Meeting Practice provides for council meetings to be recorded, and we'll place the recording of these public access sessions on the council's website where the recording of the meeting is contained, so that the whole community can view the public access session if they wish. So the first person that's requested public access today is Mr. Lyle Snell, and Lyle, over to you for the next 10 minutes.
Thank you, Interim Administrator. My name is Lyle Dennis Snell, and I appear before you today with this presentation as former Chief Minister of the 14th Legislative Assembly of Norfolk Island and as a Norfolk Islander of Pitcairn Island lineage. I thank you for allowing me to make this presentation relating to the Norfolk Island Regional Council agenda item for the meeting of 6th of July 2022, item number 9, reports from General Manager Draft Operational Plan 2022-23 and the Draft Delivery Plan 2022-2026. I am aware that Norfolk Island Regional Council has adopted the reports of Nexia Australia and Grassroots Connections Australia. As per my letter to Mr. Roach, General Manager of the Norfolk Island Regional Council, there are areas within the draft which causes me great concern, and I plead with you both to give more consideration to the drafts, in particular to the rating subcategorisation you have relied upon to raise additional revenue. However, this as it may, it has come to my attention that the reliance by the Norfolk Island Regional Council to raise revenue in this form of taxation may not be within law. And in effect, what you have suggested in your drafts should not be introduced nor compromised and should be removed entirely until lawful evidence can be provided of the legal right to impose such charges on the Norfolk Island community. It has also come to my attention that the ignoring of the state disconnect issue that currently applies to the Norfolk Island Regional Council, for example as a territory, may also be subject to question, and therefore the legal requirements to provide operational plans and delivery plans as per the agenda is also subject to question. As Norfolk Island Regional Council is an Australian registered business entity and not a government, appointed by the Australian Government Commonwealth, I asked under what authority does that allow the Norfolk Island Regional Council to implement the Draft Operational Plan 2022 and 2023 and thereby charge the Norfolk Island community Australian taxes and rates, and what, if any, as a corporate entity, what possible implications this matter could affect the managerial staff of the Norfolk Island Regional Council. Mr. Colreevy, as the President Interim Administrator of the Norfolk Island Regional Council, appointed by the Australian Government, I am of the opinion that you are responsible to provide, in writing to the Norfolk Island community, the lawful advice that what you are intending to impose on the Norfolk Island community is within law. I again plead with you to recognise the implication of the intention of these draft plans as not complying with the accepted principles of peace, order and good government. And I thank you for the opportunity, again, Mr. Colreevy, for giving me the opportunity to say those few words on that agenda item for tomorrow's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snell. I wonder if I could ask you to remain at the table so that I can ask you a couple of questions, or a few questions. You mentioned the proposals in the draft operational plan and the revenue policy not being within law.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, there is an indication from academics and legal consultants to indicate that what has transpired since 2015-2016 may not be within the terms of proper law within not only Australia but international as well. And those areas of concern, not only to the island but into the general practice of what is occurring, is still subject to ongoing discussion, and further information will be supplied in due course.
So just so that I clearly understand what you are putting to me, are you suggesting that the revenue measures contained in the Local Government Act 1993, New South Wales, as applied to Norfolk Island,
Yes.
that purport to permit this council to levy rates and charges on property on the island, are you suggesting to me that that legislation should not or does not apply to, or that part of the legislation at least, should not or does not apply to this island for legal reasons?
Yes, that is correct. That is a simple way of putting it. It is believed that the New South Wales Local Government Act 1993 should not be applied to Norfolk Island in its present form, and that Norfolk Island is not connected to the state of New South Wales, and therefore the state of New South Wales has no obligation over Norfolk Island, and nor does the Act should apply to Norfolk Island. It has been mentioned in a number of correspondence the obligation of the New South Wales Labor Government, New South Wales Local Government Act 1993. Council should manage funds and other assets as that current and future local community needs can be met in an affordable way. However, even given that, we can't afford it. If that was to apply, it is my understanding that the law itself should not apply to Norfolk Island. And there are...
Thank you. And so that I'm abundantly clear on that point, it seems to me that you are saying that Australian law, and in this particular instance, we are talking about the New South Wales Local Government Act as applied by the Commonwealth
Yes.
to Norfolk Island.
Yes.
Effectively, are you putting to me that Australian law has no jurisdiction over Norfolk Island?
In this aspect, yes. That does not apply to Norfolk Island. The Applied Laws Ordinance indicated that it would apply, but it should not apply.
Thank you. I think I understand the point that you are making. I just wanted to be clear that is what you are saying. So I thank you for your submission. The council will be meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. And item 9, which is the item that everybody has asked to address me on, will be dealt with at that council meeting, and everybody here today and other members of the public are welcome to attend.
Thank you.
So thank you for your submission. So Maria, I'd invite you to address me in the same way that I invited Mr. Snell.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity to speak today. My name is Maria Christian. I'm an ordinary resident of Norfolk Island, a mum, a nurse, just a local community member.
Can I just interrupt, Maria? Do you consent to the recording of your submission? Thank you.
That's fine.
Sorry, I should have asked you that before you started.
That's okay. So yes, I'd like to make some comments on the agenda item number 9 of the Norfolk Island, particularly in relation to the Norfolk Island Regional Council Draft Delivery Program Plan and the Operational Plan for 22-23. Kind of version 2, noting the changes from the original draft plans that were put up for submission on public exposition. I am exceedingly disappointed in the Norfolk Island Regional Council as the proposed 25% increase in council rates and other charges remains unacceptable and, to me, unethical. The reasons for this have been outlined in my submission, my formal submission, written submission, as well as many other formal submissions. And they do relate around unaffordability, lack of capacity to play, lack of assessment of capacity to pay, and for those reasons that in those previous submissions. The summary of the submissions that was included in the draft documents, these latest published on the agenda, I think was actually grossly understated. So I'm concerned that if you have not actually personally read most of those submissions, then I feel that you may actually be misled. I don't feel that NERC has addressed the issue of accountability or lack thereof in their new updates. There's been no attempt to design or implement any sort of rate peg equivalent policy or process within the document. Similarly, there's no documented process of approval from the Minister, or consultation from any external regulatory body such as IPART. The only notation that was put into that document was that of, and I quote, input from the Department of Infrastructure, end of quote. So it's input only, and I think that's a pretty poor response to those submissions. There's certainly no accountability for the NERC, the Norfolk Island Regional Council executive team, to actually achieve a benchmark of their KPIs. So there was certainly a large number of KPIs into the draft delivery plan program. However, there's no, I didn't see or read any benchmark of completion or achievement of those KPIs. And I didn't see a great deal of detail around the outcome measures on spending on infrastructures such as roads. So a fair portion of monies is being spent on roads, but there's no outcome measures as to whether that is an effective spend or not. I would have also liked to see that these KPIs and outcome measures hold ramifications for non-compliance. The $500,000 surplus remains. This could easily have been reduced by $200,000, which would again be another small change that would reduce the burden on the community and still allow council a sizeable operating surplus. The department of Infrastructure put in there $200,000, and we saw a 13 percentage point reduction in the rating amount. So we came down from 38 down to 25% with their $200,000 co-contribution. So perhaps a little reduction in surplus may actually help reduce that burden even greater. And then I guess my final point is that if the Regional Council, the Norfolk Island Regional Council, wants to instil and restore community trust and confidence, then these documents, I think, are achieving the exact opposite. They are creating hardship, and I believe they are demoralising this community to the point of retaliation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, if you could just remain there for a moment. I've just taken some notes based on what you said, and then I want to ask you a question or two. Can I just ask you, do you support any level of rate increase?
I do. I believe there is. I do believe that Norfolk Islanders will pay their way. I do believe there is inflationary rate increases, and we understand that. That level is the money question, isn't it? What number is going to be appropriate for this island?
And do you have an opinion on that?
I do believe that we need to be reflective of practices in other local councils in Australia, and we saw that, across New South Wales, council rate rises of 2.6%, and in Queensland 4.6%, making national 9 news as a rate hike, and we are being asked to come to 25%.
Right.
It's just so far out of the ballpark for me.
Okay. Now, we need to separate...
I think I need to add one more little thing there.
Please.
Is that for me personally, that amounts to 42% of my annual income going to NERC next year.
42%
42%
of your income.
of my annual income
Right.
going to NERC next year in rates.
I just have
That's
one.
before I start paying any of my living expenses.
Yep. Okay. Just have one more question. I distinguish between the charge for land rates
Yes.
and the charge for waste management. Do you support the initiatives the council has taken to stop dumping waste into the Pacific Ocean?
I support the principle around improving waste management practices. I'm not supportive of complete offshore contracts. I think there needs to be a better balance within council documents around contracting and local engagement.
Right.
So the principle
Yep.
is supported, however, the way it's being achieved, I don't support.
Right, okay, well, that's all I had to ask. So, Maria, thank you for making your address to me this afternoon. As I've said before, I will be addressing this subject tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and you're welcome to attend the council meeting.
With bells on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mention to everyone else, we're not shaking hands today as we normally would do because there is some COVID going around. It's penetrated into the council, and we, as a means of infection control, we're just being careful. So, Sally, you've asked to address me in relation to item 9.1 on the council meeting agenda for tomorrow's meeting,
Yes.
Which deals with the operational plan and revenue policies and
Yes.
budget and so on. So you have 10 minutes to
Great.
address me.
Thank you.
And I might, depending on what you say to me, I might ask you a couple of questions at the end of your
Great.
address. Please feel relaxed, you're among friends,
Thank you.
or as you're among friends. And over to you for the next up to 10 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much. So I'm
Oh,
Sally.
sorry, Sally. I should have said, I've said this in front of the others, but you weren't in the room. We are recording this session on video, and that video will be available for people to download from the meetings page, the council's
Yes.
meetings page on council's website, and I need to know before you address me that you consent to that.
I do.
Thank
And
you.
I read that in the paper, so I'm very
Okay.
comfortable and I accept that.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So
Thanks
back
for
to you,
checking.
Sally.
No.
Thank you.
So I'm Sally. I came on Ireland just under 2 years ago for a job that I then decided that the island was somewhere that I wanted to live. I purchased a property, so I became ostensibly a landowner. So I have owned properties in different parts of Australia as I have moved around, and I have paid rates, and I have understood that there is a rate rise that goes with different projects that councils would be undertaking. So my comments are, and I think it's going to be easy for me to read this out. The expansion from 4 to 23 subcategories was touted as being more equitable. However, those who have land and use it for cattle grazing, growing vegetable and fruit, generally not waste producing, are being waste management levied. As a category overall, I'm unclear as to how many are included in each of those categories, but being charged $20,695 for small farmland holdings, $51,526 for medium, and $107,779 for large farmland, would not find this equitable. Those who grow...
Can I just stop you there? Did you say 107,000?
That's for the total category.
Yes, that's what I said, overall,
Okay, overall.
because there was no breakdown
I
that I could
understand.
find for how many...
I thought you're referring to your own properties. Yep.
No.
Okay, right.
Overall. Those who grow vegetables for the consumption of tourists and locals will no doubt be forced to increase their on-costs, a financial impost that may not be affordable or sustainable for cafes and restaurants, nor residents who purchase from various outlets. Norfolk Island has had, currently in use, a user pays ticketing system. Plastics, steel cans, aluminium and cardboard are recycled offshore at $1.50 a kilo, as has been reported in the paper, with glass being crushed on island and used in road base. Most islanders and residents are sustainably aware and recycle, reuse and repurpose items. I understand negatively geared financial state of Norfolk Island Council and the imposition of increasing costs of living here, but these need to be balanced with what is equitable and just for those who have generationally lived here for decades and those residents who have chosen to have this as their home. The community burden, I sense, is inequitable, especially given the projected 500,000 surplus as noted in the draft 22-23 operational plan. General rate rises based upon mainland Australian valuations on island vary between 16 and 1,500%. And due to a range of Australian Commonwealth and state applied legislation, Norfolk Island comes under the Local Government Act New South Wales, Norfolk Island Adjusted, however does not have access to IPART, which is New South Wales Independent Pricing and Regulatory Tribunal. Councils in New South Wales can apply to have their rates increased above the nominal 0.7 to 0.5%. 4 councils in New South Wales undertook that last year. There was a 5th council that undertook that. They later withdrew. Norfolk Island, however, does not have that access nor capacity for a right of response by ratepayers to such a body. Certain amendments are unique to Norfolk Island. However, the New South Wales Minister for Local Government is not responsible for administrating that act on Norfolk Island. That responsibility falls to the Commonwealth Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories. So I have done a little bit of research with IPART and tried to understand how the rates that are being touted here could be raised. So from IPART's website, that applications for any special variation, they consider the following criteria. One is financial need. I don't have an argument with financial need here. Community engagement and awareness. I haven't experienced consultation or collaboration, only communication of the plan. The impact upon ratepayers. Quite frankly, it's devastating for many, and I project the need for social housing and affordable accommodation for those Norfolk Islanders and residents may become dispossessed of their home and land. Integrated planning and reporting documents, productivity and cost containment are the fifth item. When I was having a look at human rights, because I believe, and this is lots of different conversations that come into this, the Human Rights Commission Act 1986 was looking at provision in relation to human rights and to equal opportunity employment and for related purposes. I refer to Division 2, 10.A, Duties of Commission, with regard to the indivisibility and universality of human rights, and B, efficiently and with the greatest possible benefit to the people of Australia. The right to social services is to ensure that an individual has a certain standard of living. This includes clothing, housing, food, water, medical care and security. I see that the need for social subsidised housing here, if these rates were to continue to be imposed upon all ratepayers on island, would be financially disaffecting. I've had personal experience of sitting on a council's audit committee, and I realised that the main focus was the triple R, roads, rates and rubbish. And for me, that has not really changed because people are very concerned. Being aware of balanced practices, community dialogue and responsiveness to feedback was an essential component of that council's reputation. My personal practices are to take less than 120 litres of general waste to waste management on average once every 6 weeks. The doubling of my rates and waste management levy gives no consideration for sustainable living, reduce, reuse, repurpose, recycle, and instead will reward wastage. From the 2021-22 operational plan and the General Manager's message, managing waste service continues to be a considerable cost for this community. To start to redress the financial position within waste services, the 21-22 operational plan introduces a community waste management fee that will appear on the rates notice. The fee does not apply to farmland or lots with no residential or business properties. The deficit includes forecasted revenue raised by the new fee. Yet this coming year sees a projected increase across all categories. No direct user pays. This pathway does not encourage the aspects of sustainable living, and it's more of the not caring for the environment. So I have done a comparison of the base rates for residential, business and farmland from 2018, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21, 21, 22 and 22 to 23. Going back to, for example, 2019-20, the residential rates, base rate was $232.68. Now there's a variation this year, so small, medium and large. So if I go the middle road, that takes to $204.68. So there is a drop. So some people will benefit from a decrease in rates. Businesses, there's a variety of rates there. And farmlands, they went from $219 in 2018-19 now to $248 up to $833 for a large plot. I just see that it's inequitable, and when I look at these figures, I think that the consideration for those people that have lived here for generations, have had that land gifted to them, are now going to be very much adversely affected.
Okay, I'm just getting some notes on your last points. Sally, thank you for your submission.
You're welcome.
You've made some very good points there, and I'll be responding or making my determination in relation to the report on this subject tomorrow at the council meeting that commences at 2, and you, along with the rest of the community, are welcome to attend that
I'll be
meeting.
here. I'm very much into equity and justice, which is social justice, and the gifts that the community can offer, but needs to be with an open dialogue and collaboration. So thank you.
All right, thanks for your time, Sally. Start. I've mentioned in front of the audience that the proceedings are being recorded on video, and that video will be available on Council's website for the whole community to be able to view and listen to the comments that are being made this afternoon. I just need to know that you consent to.
I consent to that.
So Terence, you have 10 minutes to address me, and over to you.
Okay. Well, first of all, it is a very short notice to prepare something for this, even though you had it on your website, but I don't know this gentleman over here.
He's IT specialist for us.
Okay.
Yep. And you know Mr. Roach.
I know, Andrew, yeah. I just want to, I've prepared a document for you, Michael. I want to talk about the Norfolk Island rates and fees versus Indian Ocean territories, based on my premise that there's a lot of synergies between the Indian Ocean territories and Norfolk Island, and I do know that you guys know that.
Will you be leaving that document?
Yes.
That'll save me taking
Sure.
notes if you're going to be reading from it, so I'll put the pen down
You got
and
it.
listen.
Benefit, bonus. So, for instance, in the Indian Ocean territories, there's no GST and there's no stamp duty, same as Norfolk Island. The Indian Ocean territories are very remote and isolated, just like Norfolk Island. It's not the landowner's fault, that they are somewhat remote, and there's difficulties associated with, say, waste management is just one example. So what I've done is I've prepared a document here, and in my opinion, the Indian Ocean territories align itself with what's happened with Norfolk Island, or Norfolk Island's aligned itself with the Indian Ocean territories. The rating structures have been in place in the Indian Ocean Territory for decades, and the Local Government Act revenues have been derived by the minimum payment, which is to ensure that all ratepayers make an equitable contribution to rate revenue to provide for the net funding requirements of the Shire services. Also the Shire's activities and the financial costs and current and future capital requirements. The Indian Ocean Territories comprises Christmas Island and Cocos and Keeling Island councils, and these councils are legislated through the West Australian State Government, and it's been well established. To generalise, I provide the following, just very quickly. What is the taxable land? Well, in the Indian Ocean Territories, example of the type of land that are generally liable for land tax include vacant land, shops, offices, factories, rental properties, hobby farms, secondary residence such as holiday home, and a private residence owned by a company or held in trust upon trust for the beneficial owner. Exempt land in the Indian Ocean Territories, examples of an exempt land. Number one is residential, and the owner uses the land as their primary or sole or principal residence, so they're exempt rates. Residential, and the owner is moving from one resident to another, limited to 1 year. Residential, and the owner's new residence is under construction or is being refurbished, and no other property owned receives residential exemption, limit 2 years. Residential, and a new residence is under construction or is being refurbished, and another property owned is receiving residential exemption, limit 2 years. Residential, and is owned by a relative of or held in trust for a disabled beneficiary or uses the land as their primary residence, or held by the executive or deceased estate and was previously used as the primary residence of the deceased, or is by a beneficiary under a will. I'll let you have a look at these, Michael, but the rate structure basically up to the valuation value of $420,000, the flat rate is $300 per property. Between $420,000 and $1 million, which falls into most of the categories in Norfolk Island over the residential medium, is $300 plus 0.25% of each dollar in excess of $420,000. And I did a calculation based on $480,000, that would add another $200 on that, so it'd be $300 plus 200, so $500 for the year. The rating structure breaks down 1 million to 1.8 million, 1.8 million to 5 million, and 5 million to 11 million. These land tax rate scales is reviewed annually as part of the government's budgetary process. We're talking about here is the Western Australian Government. Each council then uses a variation to the standard rating system, e.g. gross rental value, which is a multiplying factor in Christmas Island, and Cocos and Keeling councils adopted what's called a minimum payment on rateable properties, only with a differential rating category. With the Indian Ocean Territories, with the waste and water service charges, from 1 July this year, there will be changes to water, wastewater and building application service fees for the Indian Ocean Territories, consistent with pricing for remote communities in Western Australia. The following increases have been applied to the new water and wastewater service charges. 2.5% increase for residential charges, 2.5% increase for non-residential charges, which is commercial, a 2% increase for miscellaneous fees and charges except for builders and conveyancing fees, and a 12% increase in water flow reduction restoration fees, which reflects the cost of providing the service. In the Indian Ocean Territories with waste management levy, a very simple per rateable category pay, a smaller annual fee, and then a use of pay levy structure. I just made a note here, I've not referenced any of the relevant Local Government Act 1995 brackets Western Australia brackets CX for Christmas Island and brackets CKI for Cocos Keeling Island. But my proposal, Michael, is this. Adopt a similar model to the Indian Ocean Territories after Norfolk Island community consultation. Freeze all draft operational plan 2022-2023 rates and fees until all Norfolk Island landowners are satisfied that the cost of owning land in Norfolk Island is fair and without risk of losing or having to sell land. NERC to seek Commonwealth ongoing funding for at least 5 years to sustain the commitment with the signed contracts with infrastructure projects in Norfolk Island. That's it. 10 minutes up.
Thank you. Well, you've got a little bit of extra time if you wanted to add anything to your prepared.
Well, I wrote 5 objections to the General Manager. I'm assuming you read all of them. But
Well, what's important is that I've read them
Yeah.
all because I'm the person who'll be making the decision, and I can assure you that by tomorrow's meeting, we've got a lot of submissions.
yeah,
I'm wading through those that I will have had the opportunity to read every one.
well, the good news is, Michael, that I kept mine nice and short. If it's not 1 page, it's only 1.5 pages.
Good.
Right. But the 5 submissions included residential. The increase on residential is unfair. And I made some recommendations with that. With the commercial one, what I can't figure out with the operational plan is the business, one of the categories is business, and the subcategory business club bar. Now, the revenue you want to derive from that is $6,000 in a year. None of the land in Norfolk Island which comprises a club or bar is less than 1,000 square metres, so we had to be Club Bar B, Bravo. With the RSL Club, as you should know, I'm pretty much involved with the RSL. We went from $3,394 up to $27,000 before your very generous reductions which you proposed in the latest. So $27,000 will mean that the RSL cannot pay. Simple as that. You've probably heard this before. But in the RSL Club, if it's the goods and services, you know, cost of material, cost of consumables, and then the Fair Work Act becomes untenable and we can't afford to pay staff, then we have a choice of shutting the business with your rates. Whether the doors are open or doors are closed, we've still got to pay your rates. And that is unfair, untenable, and it's just not right that we should be losing one of the foundation properties in Norfolk Island, not only in Norfolk Island, but every state and territory of Australia. So I'd like you to seriously consider where the service clubs in Norfolk Island are placed. They cannot be in business club bar category B. We just cannot afford it. Talking with some of Andrew's staff in Kingston, they believe that we'll come under business cafe restaurant, category B, category A. And yet in your operational plan, there is no category A revenue, nor is there a business club bar A. There's none in there. And that's because none of us have portions of land less than 1,000 square metres. So there's been some oversight on the actual size of land or portions of land in Norfolk Island that you can rate us against in Norfolk Island. I am deeply concerned about the RSL Club, very deeply concerned. Norfolk Island has fought from here in either New Zealand or Australia. We are real Anzacs. We have brothers who fought in the New Zealand Expeditionary Forces and a brother in the Australian IAF. We had a brother killed in New Zealand and a brother killed in Australia from the same family, in the same war. And that building up there is representative of every Norfolk Islander family in Norfolk Island. Every one of the families are linked to the Honour Board and the RSL Club. It would be an absolute travesty to shut the RSL Club in Norfolk Island. We cannot afford it. Just for your knowledge, Michael, the RSL sub-branch, which is us ex-military people, we own the building and we sublet the bar and we sublet the kitchen. We've got a small rental coming in from both of those two sublet leases, and we just cannot increase the rent anymore. It's impossible to increase the rent. The cost of alcohol in Norfolk Island is prohibitive. The cost of every other consumable items and produce in Norfolk Island is getting very prohibitive, and we just cannot increase the rent. The tourism numbers, you know, we've been getting reasonable patronage, Michael, in the RSL Club. And it's becoming a location thing. And that's because we're close to most of the accommodation areas. I feel sorry for the Lease Club as an example. They're out of town. But, you know, we are paying rates in Waste Management Centre on a vacant piece of land, a car park, 2,023 square metres. the buildings on another portion of land greater than 1,000 square metres. So we've got to get hit by the large portion, the category B, for a club bar. $27,000 is unreasonable and unsustainable, and we cannot afford it, and we would just cannot sustain that increase in our rates.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for your submission. And as I've said earlier, this matter there'll be a decision made on the matter tomorrow at 2 o'clock at the council meeting, and you, along with the rest of the community, are welcome to attend that session.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Terence. Submission. Thank you, Lisa. So you have 10 minutes to address me, and over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to speak. I just speak as an ordinary resident of Norfolk Island, not somebody who's au fait with budgets and processes of councils. I come here as somebody who has been living on the island for just over 21 years, and prior to that paid my rates and taxes and charges and levies and things in Australia. And I'm a person that supports the need to have rates and taxes and charges because that buys me civilisation and the quality of life that we all expect to have. However, the fact that NERC has budgeted a 140% increase in income from the rates and charges from this community, when no Australian local council would have those sorts of increases considered or even implemented, as it would really be, I mean, first of all, it would be illegal, but it would also be, I think, considered laughable, excuse me from not being offensive, but to even suggest that kind of an increase across any other council. I asked you the question why, in my submission to you, why you did not mirror a fair pegging rate from New South Wales or Queensland to apply here, in the region of the 2 to 5% increase that IPEG, I think it is called, recommends. Even though pegging laws, as found across Australia, do not apply uniquely here, I ask, wouldn't the morally right thing to do be to peg our increases to equivalent rates? In my submission, I also stated that the waste management increases appear to exceed the reasonable cost to the council of providing waste management services, and I'd like to be reassured that the funding of other aspects of council functions doesn't come from waste management charges. It does not appear to be a properly fair charge for provision of a service. The budgeted cost for running waste management is stated at $2.758 million, and the rates and fees charged to the community for waste management amounts to about $2.255 million. With such a large impost to the community, we deserve a more detailed explanation of the expenditure side of the levy, including what is being purchased under the $621,000 listed as other, and why the costs of contracts are so high at $1.2 million. While you were able to cut some of the increases and waste management charges since receiving, I understand, over 400 submissions, or we were able to get to an increase from DIRD to cover $200,000, and that, of course, has just happened in the last few weeks, the increase in rates at an average of 25% on top of the 10% increase last year is still exorbitant. Even with the reduced amount able to be found that was able to be put to our budget from last week, the exorbitant increase in waste management charges for shops and accommodation places between an increase of 353% to 3,871% is just unacceptable. It really is. As I stated in my submission, I totally object to the unfair introduction of waste management charges on vacant blocks of land, as already been suggested. And in particular, I really want to emphasise that I totally object to the exorbitant increase in waste management fees for farms, which, even with the 44% reduction found last week, is an increase of up to 1,782%. I find the contradiction infuriating that a few weeks ago I attended a NERC public meeting where a food security consultant, paid I assume for by our rates and charges, told us that we needed to turn more of our land over to growing locally and eating seasonally. Can I ask if you could tell me, if you walked across the road to Foodlands right now, what the difference in a price of a dozen eggs would be between the locally produced eggs and the imported eggs?
Well, you can ask, but this is not an interactive session.
That's fine.
This is your
Yep,
opportunity
do you know,
to make
that's
submissions.
fine. I'll leave that as a
So ask the
request.
question.
I will
And,
answer that for you.
Yep.
I only purchase locally produced eggs. That's my stance. But as your extra charges to our growers get passed on to us as consumers, I expect that the cost now at about $15 a dozen for the locally produced product can only rise. And that's about $7.50 to $8.50 difference to the imported, which is less than that. It's the same for our local market gardeners having to pass the extra costs on to us for our fruit and our vegetables. I mean, do you see the irony of one arm of council paying a consultant to tell us to grow more food locally, yet another arm of council forcing us to the cost of locally produced food sky high? I would have hoped that actually through this budget you would have been providing incentives to us to grow and produce more of our own local food, which would have been in keeping with the recommendations of the consultant that you paid to come and tell us that. It is infuriating, and I hope that you can understand where our anger comes from when we see that sort of position put forward to us. With over $4 million of council revenue coming from rates, fees and charges, this community deserves greater transparency and of what appear to be hidden budgeted expenditure items in the over $10 million that's listed in other. That's close to a third of the budget, including $3.3 million expenditure at the bond in other, $1.7 million in registry in other, registry licensing and regulatory, and $621,000 at waste management and $449,000 for ICT services, all under other. They could have great explanations, but that is an awful lot of money. A third of the budget is explained under other. In my submission, I asked for an explanation of your research into other income generation options canvassed beyond rates and waste management increases, your analysis of the expected increase to cost of living as a result of these rates and fee increases, the anticipated household and business capacity to pay, the impact waste management charges will have on our clubs, and I mirror what Terence has said here. I've heard, for instance, not that I'm speaking for them, but our local tennis club, that their fees and rates will actually exceed the total income of the club. And your expected impact on the community for support of waste management minimisation strategies begun over previous years when we see such massive changes. That really breaks my heart. I support all of the strategies that have gone into waste minimisation in this community. I understand that some equipment needs to be purchased, but to actually demonise waste management out of this process is just wrong. It really is, because the incentive for me is not to burn my things, to say, who cares? You're going to charge me for this huge amount of money. Why should I be participating in everything that's working towards minimising waste? In my submission, I asked for an explanation of in the week that you're able to review our over 400 submissions and prepare the revised fees and charges, did you look at, for instance, the new information that's available, for instance, through the 2021 census findings for Norfolk Island? The figures that were there include that median weekly household income on Norfolk Island is $1,184 against the Australian median of $1,746. That's quite a significant difference in people's pockets. And that 24% of households have less than $650 total household weekly income against the Australian average of 16.5%. There are plenty of figures in that report alone that provide a picture of the average Norfolk Islander family that tell me that our households cannot stand these imposed increases. I believe that nowhere in Australia would a community accept their council imposing increases of this magnitude, and indeed they would be unlawful. 10% increase last year, 25% increase this year. What's to come? There are other ways to find the revenue council requires, and I respectfully request that you accept that proposition and that you undertake the work to identify those other options. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I did have questions of other people who've spoken this afternoon, but of the questions I had, you have answered through the course of what you've said, so don't feel that I wasn't listening. In fact, I was listening carefully. So thank you for your submission, and as I've informed everyone else, this matter will be dealt with at the council meeting that starts at 2 o'clock tomorrow, and you are welcome
Thank you.
to attend.
I'll be at work at that time. I won't be able to
Okay,
attend.
well, it is open to the public, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. On video, and that video will be placed on council's website at the same location as people go to find a recording of the meeting and the minutes and the agendas and so on.
Yeah, that's
so it'll be
right.
available to the public.
Yeah.
So you have 10 minutes to
Yeah.
address me. We have received a detailed submission from you already. So I'm happy for you to add whatever it is you wish to.
Yeah, I'm not planning to recap what's in the submission. It was an extensive submission. I just wanted to focus more on the future and how this will unfold going forward. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for meeting with us on the 3rd of June and discussing some of the issues facing the ATA. I'm here representing the ATA. I'm not here in my personal capacity. I should make that clear.
Sure.
We did indicate to you at the beginning of that meeting on the 3rd of June that we were sceptical that there would be any changes to the proposed charges, increase in charges. We were wrong, and I'm pleasantly surprised. However, and that's particularly around the waste management charges. So thank you for that. And thank you to the federal government also for chipping in and the cooperation between the council and the federal government on that. However, when you look at the accommodation sector, which is the mainstay of this economy, without the accommodation sector being able to bring in visitors, nobody's going to go to the cafes, nobody's going to book tours, etc. So there's no downstream revenue for anybody unless the accommodation sector is viable. If you look at the rates, the base rate increase, even with the amended changes, is still 218% increase on the base rate and a 39.3% increase on the ad valorem rate. And we're just talking about land rates now. That is exceptionally high. I understand that it's lower than, than what the initial proposed charges were, but it's still incredibly high, and it would be unacceptable to any community in Australia on the mainland. In addition to that, it would be illegal because most states and territories would have that those charges would be regulated and those increases would be there would be an independent authority that would regulate those increases. A magnitude of 218% is incredible. It's just it's hard to actually comprehend, and to the extent that it impacts the tourism sector, it will impact the whole economy. And so I just keep that in mind because I foresee further increases next year. And I would like to suggest some improvements perhaps to the process. You have proved to me that the submission process was effective in some fashion. However, with the accommodation sector, it's a special, I should just point out that the cash flow in the accommodation sector is different to a cafe, it's different to a restaurant, it's different to a supermarket. We sell a substantial amount of our bookings in advance. So when you come to us in June and say these are the proposed increases, we've already locked in 6 months to 12 months of bookings that are at a lower rate. We can't anticipate what you're going to come back with. And so we're talking about direct bookings. With wholesale bookings, we legally contracted in until the 31st of March every year. And so it's not as if we can go back to the wholesalers and say, can you please undo that rate that we agreed on and here's a new rate. And even if we could, we would outprice ourselves from the marketplace because this is a competitive destination and we're competing with Vanuatu and Fiji and all the other destinations. So it's not like we have unlimited room to increase our nightly rates. It's a little bit different with the accommodation sector. We need lots of advance notice. So what I'm suggesting is instead of coming to us in June of next year and saying, look, these are the proposed increases, and then we all scramble like crazy to put a submission together. You scramble like crazy to go and find other sources of revenue, etc. Why not at some point during the year, with reasonable notice, sit down with us, engage meaningfully with the tourism sector and with the ATA as a representative within that sector, and say, this is the dilemma, this is the challenge that we face, how can we work it out? What other sources of revenue are there? Does it make sense to increase the passenger movement charges, or are they high enough as it is? What's the impact going to be? So in other words, work with us on a risk assessment. Part of that risk assessment would include an income and expenditure survey of the community. What's the capacity to pay? Lisa just mentioned in the census, the 2021 census, that the household income on Norfolk Island is about a third lower than what it is on the mainland. That needs to be a consideration, you know, on an individual level. For businesses, you know, we pay the wages of these people, and if we don't have an ability to increase those wages so that people can keep up and pay their rates, etc., it's just a downward spiral. It leads to a downward spiral for the whole economy. And the accommodation sector happens to be the biggest employer on the island. I think the council's the second largest employer. And so it's really important to pay attention and engage with us, please. And do a risk assessment. I don't know if one was done, there's not an interactive session. Maybe you can tell me if a risk assessment was done, but it should be done. So,
What I can tell you or say to you, particularly in relation to the point you made about the forward bookings, you know, and the impact of charges now on bookings that are already locked in 9 months out, all of that was taken to government.
right,
So we did listen,
yes,
not just within this building, but we took that information to government, and it's one of the reasons why the changes that are now being proposed in the revised version of the draft plan have come about.
Right.
It's because we did listen. And in responding to us, the Minister has asked us to make sure that there is better and more community engagement in subsequent years.
yes,
And perhaps for everybody's information, the situation that we were in, we went into administration, to formal administration after the interim administration period, about 12 months ago. Sorry, about 6 months ago. And in terms of what's in these plans that are in front of you now, these are plans that needed to be developed effectively from scratch, because earlier operational plans and revenue policies, as you saw in the public inquiry, earlier versions of those plans did not cut the mustard in terms of providing council with a revenue base that it needs to remain as a viable operating entity. So we're 6 months further on, so in terms of the development of plans for the next 12 months, there will be a lot more time for communication with and consultation with the community than there has been in the last 12 months. Because in the last 6 to 12 months, we were starting from scratch. We now have a framework to take us forward into the future, and about which the Minister has said to us, more consultation, please. We recognise the need for that ourselves, and we are committing to the government that, yes, we will do that. We hear what everyone's saying. We hear what the Minister's saying. We hear what the community is saying. So please be assured that when you make submissions, like the submissions that you've all made, or many of you in the room this afternoon, that's not just a box-ticking exercise. And you've heard Raoul say that, you know, from his earlier meetings, he can see changes in the plan as a result of submissions that they made. So I just want to assure everybody that this is not, we're not just doing this, having this session for the sake of having it, to say we've done it. We're doing it to listen, and we will be putting a lot more effort into engaging and communicating over the next 12 months about where to from here.
okay, great, yeah. Because we're willing to work with council to find other solutions, but it requires council to engage with us as well, yeah.
Did you have other?
No, that's it. I was going to mention the independent authority and limiting the increases. They've been mentioned by other speakers before me.
Sure.
So I think that's important just to instill confidence in people that there are going to be no major surprises going forward.
Okay, well, Roel, thank you very much again, well, for your regular submissions and input into the process. And as I've said to everyone else, this will come up before council tomorrow at a meeting starting at 2 o'clock. You are welcome to attend, as is everyone from in the community.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
So, Raoul, you were the last
Yeah.
speaker. Thanks again. We will conclude the session now, and I thank everybody for their attendance.